Welcome to the Pot.Live podcast. I'm your host, Lenny G. This podcast is all about connecting the community with the thought leaders of business and entertainment in the cannabis industry. As this industry expands and becomes more and more mainstream, we want to educate and entertain our listeners and become your choice and voice for all things cannabis. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show. If you are into the recreational side of the cannabis industry, yes, stoners, I'm talking to you, then thepot.com is the online and mobile destination for you. That's right, THEPOT.com, thepot.com. Where else can you find the exclusive pot made of the month? Take a pot quiz and win prizes. Scroll through hilarious memes and jokes and check out the latest podcasts, news, and trends, all while having your own profile and voice in the pot.com forum. Visit thepot.com today and get lit. Welcome to another episode of the Pot.Live podcast. I'm your host, Lenny G, and today we have a very special guest, a former United States Navy SEAL and SEAL sniper course instructor, author. He's all over the internet. We're going to get him some extra exposure here, and he's going to drop some value on our listeners and our different groups that we're involved in. Mr. Brandon Webb, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Glad for you to take some time and speak to our listeners and our group that we actually have a live studio audience on this recording. I always wanted to say that, be like a sitcom. But we want to get to some serious stuff. So Brandon, it's better if you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then I'd love to dive into some of the mindset and focus tools that you have taught so many people.
Sure. I had a pretty interesting childhood. I was raised by hippie parents who both became entrepreneurs later on in life. I ended up leaving home at 16 years old. At the time, home was a floating 47-foot sailboat. We'd done a couple trips as a family, cruising around Mexico on and off homeschool. We were on a big sailing trip to Australia, and I made it to Papeete, Tahiti, and my dad and I had a big blow-up argument. I had grown up working on a scuba diving boat as a 13-year-old kid until then, so I had a ton of boating experience, but we were arguing over seamanship, and he just had enough of my shit, basically. And I learned an important lesson that day was there's only one captain on the ship. There'd be one in charge. So I left home at 16, went back to California, and fortunately my old boss, Bill, let me live on the dive boat I grew up working on. It was a recreational scuba diving boat. It was a great job. I mean, we had a hot tub on the boat, private chef. We would take guys diving out to the Channel Islands. It was a great experience as a young kid. I worked on that boat, finished high school, and, Bill was wanting to make me a captain. I had taken my Coast Guard, all my exams for 100-ton master's captain's license when I was 18. But I didn't want that lifestyle. I'd found the Navy SEALs through a book called Rogue Warrior, which was written by the founding member of SEAL Team 6, Dick Marcinko. Amazing life story, and got me really excited about the SEALs. And at the time, I'd wanted to be a pilot. I had this dream to be a fighter pilot, and long before Top Gun came out, the original, and I was even more fascinated. But, decided to be a SEAL. For me, it was something I could do. And at the time, I didn't have money for college. My grades weren't that great. And it was something I could sign the papers. I'd scored decent on the ASVAB, the entrance exam. So that's what I did. I joined the Navy at 18. Took me a few years. Back then, you couldn't get a contract straight into the SEAL program. You had to take a regular Navy job and then apply once you're in. Today, you can at least get a shot at it direct, but that was not the case when I joined. I ended up as a search and rescue swimmer in helicopters and a sonar operator in HS-6, which was a H-60 Sikorsky helicopter squadron. Squadron was independent, based in San Diego, but we would deploy the squadron onto the aircraft carriers. So anytime the flight operations happened, the helicopter needed to be flying this starboard delta pattern, they called it. in case the pilots needed to be rescued. Made it to BUD/S in 1997 after my first application was denied. It's a long story around that, but made it. Second application started with class 215 with 220 originals and graduated about 7 months later with 23. 23 out of the 220 that started finished. Went to SEAL Team 3, which was at the time, the different SEAL team on the East and West Coast were assigned a geographic location. SEAL Team 3 was responsible for the Middle East. It's one of the reasons why I chose SEAL Team 3 is because they were, pre 9/11, they were one of the few teams besides SEAL Team 4, which was operating in South America. SEAL Team 3 was one of the few teams that was actually doing some operational work. So went to Team 3, great experience. Deployed to the Middle East with Gulf Platoon. It was a great experience. While we were over in the Middle East, we were doing non-compliant shipboardings, boarding the oil smugglers out of Iraq. Saddam Hussein was smuggling oil out of Iraq against the UN sanctions. So we'd board those ships in the middle of the night, sometimes cut our way inside with cutting torches. You would have the snipers doing overwatch. So as we were doing that, we got called down to the USS Cole. If you guys remember back in history, the Cole had been bombed by two guys in a boat in the port of Aden, Yemen. It almost sank this billion-dollar warship. We got called to go set up a boat perimeter and a sniper perimeter on the Cole as it was in the port. So that was my kind of first experience with, wow, the way that warfare is being fought in the world is not conventional. Right? It's not tanks, big warships. It's unconventional warfare. And came back from that deployment. I got asked to jump into a platoon that was dysfunctional. Not unlike business, sometimes you put people together and it's not good chemistry. There was this platoon called Echo Platoon at SEAL Team 3 that just had some real issues, and I believe they had failed their operational readiness exam, which is a huge red flag. So Kevin, the ops officer, called me in because I was trying to re-enlist tax-free. I wanted to get my bonus without paying any taxes on it. And he says, hey, I got a solution. You go jump into this fucked up platoon and help rebuild it and turn it around, and you'll be deployed within your window and you'll get your bonus tax-free in the Middle East. So I said, I don't know, let me think about it. And ultimately, he convinced me to do it. I jumped into that platoon. Became very apparent that why they were, had some serious issues. Fortunately, the platoon commander stayed, Chris Cassidy. Chris, as we record this episode, is in the International Space Station. He's the second Navy SEAL astronaut, and he's in charge of the entire astronaut program. So went on to do amazing things. Chris was an amazing leader. So I'm glad that he was still in that platoon. But anyway, I don't want to go too far into the weeds. The fact was that platoon was next to be deployed, and then 9/11 happened. And so I found myself back in the Middle East and then in Afghanistan. I did a bunch of stuff early on in the war when the strategy was very clear and the rules of engagement were great, and did a ton of really interesting missions with the Germans, the Norwegians, the Danish. A lot of really good sniper reconnaissance stuff. Ended up coming back, getting pulled into advanced sniper training. And then a guy named Bob, who was a SEAL Team 6 guy, called up to the sniper cell where I was doing advanced training. And he said, hey, we're doing this pilot program. We're rebuilding the SEAL sniper course, modernizing it, making it, turning it into a world-class program. Will you come down and help us run the pilot? So I did that. And then Bob called me up and said, hey, I know you have orders to be a BUD/S instructor, which, I was going to go back and be to the basic training command and be an instructor, which is a shore billet. It's like taking a break. You get kind of a break. It's a real cushy job. You get to work out and motivate a bunch of SEAL wannabes at your disposal. But I gave it up to go teach the basic course. I figured at the time, that we had just deployed guys into Iraq, for the second time. We had a war going on in Afghanistan. Guys were getting deployed. I thought, okay, I need to do my duty here. And it's a better better place for me to go. I'll be more effective. So I went down there right as Chris Kyle, who's a lot of people know as the American Sniper. Chris was a new guy when I was at SEAL Team 3. I didn't know him that well. He was just finishing, when I checked in as an instructor, he was just finishing up the course. He had, I think, 2 or 3 weeks left to graduate. I checked on. Eventually, I got promoted to the course manager, which was being in charge of all the instructors and the curriculum and the students. And during this period, to bring it back to how you and I connected, during this period, we had access to some of the best performance coaches and athletes in the world. It was that time in history after 9/11, everybody wanted to kind of do their thing to contribute. And so oftentimes we didn't even have to pay for these consultants to come in and help us. They just wanted to help. Ended up meeting a guy named Lanny Basham, who had developed a program around mental management. Lanny was a gold medalist as a shooter, had developed this program in the 70s to help him deal with the mental management collapse during his first time at the Olympics in Munich. He actually won silver medal. And I really identified with what he was saying. And, when Lanny developed his program, there was no such thing as positive psychology, like it is today. But I implemented a lot of what Lanny was telling us in the sniper program, and I started seeing the results happen overnight. Like literally overnight, our attrition rate. And the SEAL sniper program is 3 months long, 7 days a week. It's an incredibly stressful course. We'll have the guys, doing, ballistics course in the morning, and they're out on the range until the sun sets and doing incredibly hard, stressful shooting conditions that we put them in. And, 3 months later, we graduate them. And at the time, it was a 30% failure rate. When we started implementing mental management and really teaching it to the students as a tool, and also we adopted a positive teaching style, which I'll get into, versus negative teaching style. Negative teaching style being we were yelling at these guys, pointing out all the mistakes. What we didn't realize, we were programming them for failure. And when we did all this stuff, the failure rate went to zero, nearly zero. Like you really had to fuck up to not graduate the program, because we were such good teachers. And if you were there and willing to learn, you would make it through the course. And so it's something that's just stayed with me into my kind of second career as an entrepreneur and a business professional. Look, I myself, like a lot of people, have experienced a lot of adversity in life. I've lost a lot of friends in the war. I lost my first business, been divorced. Life is tough. Like life is not easy, but I feel like it's a hell of a lot easier when you have a growth mindset and a positive mindset. I feel sorry for these people that just kind of dwell in misery. And so anyway, I know I'm going long.
No, that's good, Brandon. And you're hitting on things. That's what I want to do. I wanted to get your story and then transition into how, through your experience that you already described partially, how that mindset and those mindset tricks or tips can almost be related to everyone going through this current crisis. We're recording this in the spring of 2020 in the coronavirus crisis right now. So how can anyone, no matter what walk of life you are, use some of those tools? I know you spoke about mindset, focus, visualization. If you can share some of those tips, that would be great.
Yeah. I'll get into that quick, I promise.
No, go as long as you want, my friend. We appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. So to catch kind of people up to kind of post-Navy, I decided for a variety of reasons, I got promoted early twice. I was a chief, a 28-year-old in charge of one of the best sniper programs in the world. I had amazing staff, amazing students, many that are now well-known because of the books and stuff like that, like Marcus Luttrell, Chris Kyle. I decided really, I'd kind of hit burnout, and I saw the future. I was taking like some business courses during night school. I was finishing my degree on the GI Bill. And I took this class where we had to do this exercise and read the world, and I applied it to kind of what was happening in the military. And I'm like, wow, this is like a meat grinder. Like for me to promote up, I need to keep deploying over and over again, because the leadership should have structured it to encourage guys to take a break and But it was like the guys who were getting promoted were deploying constantly. And that's a whole nother story of incentives and good leadership versus bad. But I said, I need to get out of here. I want to spend more time with my family. I had young kids. I got tired of telling my 5-year-old son, who was, by the way, born when I was in Afghanistan. I came home to a 5-month-year-old boy.
Wow.
I got tired of telling him I'm not going to be at his baseball game anymore. So I left the teams in 2006, wanted to get into business for myself. I had this idea to do a kind of West Coast training facility that was anchored by a 3-circuit racetrack. So I had raised a bunch of money, got some partners, bought 1,000 acres, got the entire project approved. And then around 2008, the real estate industry collapsed. All of our investors were like, we don't have any money to put in. It was just a total shit show, to sum it up eloquently. And I had to walk away from everything and lost my life savings, got a divorce. And it was a real low point in my life because here's a kid that left home at 16, became a SEAL, running the sniper program. I had accomplished a lot and had a lot of confidence, and then all of a sudden just got kicked in the teeth. But we all have our minds drift to those negative, bad thoughts. And I caught myself. I'm like, wait a minute, I need to think about this differently. And I started applying the same stuff I used to teach sniper students and coach my own instructor staff. Okay, I need to really think about the positives here. Like what just happened to me over the last 3 years? Well, I learned how to raise capital. I learned how to read financials. And now I laugh because, profit and loss statement is basic arithmetic. But when you're like new to something and you throw that spreadsheet in front of somebody, it can be intimidating. So I started focusing on all the positive stuff. And then my attitude changed in an instant. And even though I was getting divorced, I'm like, my ex and I were committed to having a good relationship for our kids' sake. So there was a lot of positives that were happening. And I ended up getting a job in industry. A headhunter found me and recruited me for L3, division of L3, which is a big $16 billion defense company. I went to work for L3. It was amazing training. They trained me as a business development director, made a ton of money, added what I think is a lot of value. I helped grow their business. But I started writing on the side for magazines. And then I got asked to run a blog for military.com. And then that turned into the business that I have today. So back in 2012, I saw that on the internet, there was no information, videos, podcasts about the world of special ops and military. And military content as a genre has always done well, right? Like you and I grew up watching, the war movies, the shows on television. I mean, I still remember one of the greatest movies, The Great Escape, with Steve McQueen, these like amazing film. But in 2012, the entertainment industry had not adopted the internet. And there was this like up and coming kind of male audience that was desperate to kind of engage with that kind of content. And there was a few forums like run by like authentic guys, but the minute some average Joe jumped in there, he'd get yelled at. And so I had this idea to create content around the world of special ops and launched a website, softrep.com, in 2012, got into podcasting, started selling products, got into e-commerce about 3.5 years ago. So we're really like today, that's the business I run. It's a content that drives commerce business model. I had a brand called the Crate Club, which I'm in the process of, knock on wood, I should sign a contract today or tomorrow of selling to one of our competitors. And yeah, it's been a great ride. I'm a member of the YPO, Young Presidents Organization. I have a growth mindset. I went back to school. I'm in a 2-year Harvard Business School program called OPM. And I bootstrapped the company, which I'm proud of. I just started raising a little bit of capital this year, but largely bootstrapped the company to 8-figure revenue, which I'm definitely proud of that. I know there's definitely reasons to raise money, but I see so many young entrepreneurs. I'm like, God, you just need to sell something. Like, you don't need to raise money to do what you want to do. Like, there's a time and a place, but that's kind of my story. I'm happy to take any questions you have right now, and I can get into like deeper on the mental management stuff as well.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing all of that. And it's funny, well, not funny, I guess. It's life experience that you had difficulty in becoming a Navy SEAL, difficulty in going to war, difficulty with divorce or business hurdles or obstacles or failures, but you got through all those. So how did you keep that same mindset and apply it to different parts of life? It's almost the same journey, just in a different street, right?
Yeah. I would say the big factors in mental management, self-image, using visualization as a tool, and then positive versus negative. And that applies to like your self-talk. It applies to how you interact with people in the world, choosing either a positive narrative or a negative narrative. Those are kind of the big components of a mental management program. And I used to teach a 3-hour course about this to the sniper students when they first check in, and tell them, look, your new standard is going to be perfection, and it's going to seem, unfair and ridiculous, but that's the standard we're going to hold you to, is to perfection is what we expect. And when we started talking to them like that, they started producing perfect scores where we never had seen in the past. So the self-image is important because we all walk around with a certain image. Self-image kind of drives who we are going to become. A lot of people they impose limiting factors on themselves. We've all heard people say, I'm not good at remembering names. I'm not good at math. I'm not a good public speaker. I'm not a good dancer. When you think of yourself that way, you're going to be that way. Like, that's just the way it is. It's when you make a conscious decision to work on that, like, rather than be the person that can't remember names. If you want to change that, you've got to, like any habit, it takes time, but you have to start thinking and talking to yourself differently. And there's a whole program to that where you kind of put these signs, whether it's on your smartphone or yellow stickies on the bathroom mirror, to kind of encourage you to talk and think about yourself in a different way, to kind of transition from the old you to the new you. But, I hear this all the time, and you can be successful you could be a doctor or a successful business person and still have this like self-image issues that we have to work on. We all work on it until the day we die. I think I mentioned on the call that we were on, I was watching a sales video by the original Wolf of Wall Street, the character
Jordan Belfort.
Yeah, Jordan. So he was on stage giving his talk, which, the guy can sell for sure, but he was carrying his Red Bull, and he's like, oh, I got to put it down here. I'm a spiller. I spill everything. And I'm like, oh man, like, there it is. It's like it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, when you think of yourself as spilling shit, you're going to be the guy that spills stuff everywhere. So I was like, oh, I got you. And so self-image is huge. And there's a book called With Winning in Mind that the guy, Lanny, who I work closely with, is a friend of mine now. He wrote that book, and he goes into detail on how to get yourself to turn your self-image around. The visualization as a tool is something we taught snipers. Again, when I got these guys in the room and told them, look, this is one of the toughest courses you're ever going to, take in the military. We demand so much out of you that we're going to push you to such a high level of perfection. So when if you're unpracticed, you're still going to be way above anybody else. And so part of that was using visualization as a tool. So you have to learn something and know the fundamentals before you can apply visualization, right? You can't just watch a dance class on YouTube and start imagining yourself doing all these moves. You need to kind of start with the practical lessons and understand the moves. And once you do that, then you can kind of get inside your head and visualize this stuff. And the story I love to tell, and I'll speed it up because I know I went long on the intro, was Lanny told me about this guy, Captain Jack Sands. He was a Navy fighter pilot that got shot down in Vietnam, spent 4 years in the Hanoi Hilton, which was the nickname for one of the main prisoner of war camps in North Vietnam. Just terrible conditions, tortured, living in a box. for 4 years. But this guy played golf in his head. He played all his favorite golf courses. He came back from when the war ended. They were taking him to Balboa Naval Hospital in San Diego. The plane landed. He was in this van with some other POWs, and they drove past the golf course, which is close to the back gate at Naval Air Station North Island. And he just like lost it. He's like, stop the van. Let me out of here. I got to play golf. I'm dying to shoot a round of golf. Goes into the clubhouse. They look at him like, who is this homeless guy that just walked in off the streets? He tells them who he is. And these guys are like, of course we can help you play golf. Take him to the pro shop, they deck him out, give him a set of clubs, and he shoots 18 holes, and he shoots a par, having not picked up a club in 4 years, in the worst shape of his life. And that's a true story, and kind of demonstrates the power of visualization and being able to practice perfect. I mean, these guys were like, how is this possible? He said, guys, I haven't hit a bad shot in 4 years. I've been playing perfect golf in my head for 4 years straight. Visualization is a great tool for public speaking. It's a great, you see a lot of Formula One guys visualize the track beforehand. They're not only visualizing driving the track perfectly, but they're imagining, what happens if this happens, like all this contingency planning and visualization. So you've kind of already had the fire drill or the emergency. You've repeated it like happening and what you're going to do, how you're going to react. So visualization is a powerful tool. The biggest thing we did as a instructor cadre was notice that we were teaching in a negative style, which there's a time and a place for that. Like SEAL training, basic 101 is a time to just throw everything you can at these guys and see if they have what it takes inside to not quit. But when you're, taking already motivated, professionals as SEALs and teaching them how to be the best snipers in the world, we don't need to kind of pile on a bunch of negativity. So we changed from negative style of teaching to a positive style. So we would just reinforce the fundamentals of shooting, all the corrective procedures, whereas in the past we'd point out the mistakes. And when you're pointing out mistakes to people, especially beginners, you're just programming them for failure. And anyone within earshot is picking up on these bad behavior, bad habits, and it spreads like coronavirus. And so, and all these things, and more that we did. And when we wrote this kind of mindset curriculum, instantly we went from, just expecting 30% of the class to fail out first. And typically they'd fail out on the shooting exams or stalking, which is like the stealth and concealment exercise where they have to sneak up to the target. We started passing everybody, and we started having people shoot perfect scores that, typically we'd get guys shooting 90, 95 was a great score. First time in history, of course, we started having perfect scores like as a regular thing. It's because we just set the bar to perfection rather than, set it a little bit lower. So it definitely made an impact on me and my time with Lanny and the rest of the coaches and Olympians. And, there's a big difference between a gold medal mindset, like a champion mindset, than the silver or bronze. The gold medalists, their attitude is they're going to win no matter what. It doesn't matter if they're running a race and the shoes fall off their feet. They're still going to win. If the tennis racket breaks, they're going to beat you with the stick. You know what I mean? And that's the difference, because we've all seen people, they're doing something, whether it's playing a game of basketball or driving a car or at the workplace, and then something bad goes wrong, or they didn't get the favorite this or the favorite that, and the people just collapse. They lose their shit. And that's weak mentality. I mean, and so, the champion mindset is like, it doesn't matter what's happening to me. I'm going to deal with it and get over it. Makes a huge difference in life. And so it's something that I really embody today. I wrote a book called Mastering Fear about that when I taught my friend Kamal how to swim when he was in his 40s and really overcome his fear of the water. A very successful guy, venture capitalist. His brother built AngelList. For those of you guys familiar with AngelList, I use it with my own kids. I teach them how to be kind of mentally tough and resilient because there's so many negative outside forces, in the world, whether it's the workplace, school, or sports. People have good intentions, but they don't realize sometimes they're programming these kids for failure.
It's funny, last week, the Masters was supposed to be played, and they played a lot of old Masters press conferences and stuff from Tiger Woods when he was a kid, when he won the first Masters in 97, and he was only a pro for like 3 or 4 months, and he won that. And in the press conference, they were asking him, what's your mindset now? Like, what do you want to do now that you won the Masters? And he's like, I want to win every tournament I play in. And there was a chuckle in the room, like, you can't do that. That's not possible. And he goes, if I show up, I'm here to win. Second place sucks and third is even worse. I'm here to win. Yeah. And even though obviously he wasn't going to win every tournament, that's impossible. That mindset allowed him to go from great to legendary. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just by trying to be perfect. So it alludes to what you just said earlier. So yeah. I found that interesting. Brandon, tell everybody where they can find you on social media, online, if they want to get in touch with your team, find your books. Where can they do that?
Yeah, so my main business is sofrep.com. That's SOF as in Foxtrot, REP.com. That's where our main content hub is. We also have an e-commerce survival store, which we talk about being lucky. We rebranded our store as Survival Store in January, and then all this coronavirus hits. That's my main business. They can find me on Instagram and Twitter, just at Brandon T. Webb. And then my author site is myfullname.com. It's BrandonTylerWebb.com.
Great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time for this portion of the interview. Before we end that portion, I know you said you had a funny story. Since we are a cannabis-related show normally, I know you had a funny story about the first time you tried THC, if you wanted to share that.
It wasn't the first time I tried THC, in all honesty. I did grow up as a kid in California, but I hadn't used THC since I was like a kid experimenting in high school. I joined the Navy, and obviously they drug test. And I think California at the time was the only state where the recruiter could waive your application if you did say that you smoked pot. But I'm pretty sure I told him I hadn't tried marijuana. I knew enough at that point in life, like, just say no to everything on that application. So I was out of the Navy, and my dad has a house in the East Cape, down at Cabo San Lucas. He had built a home down there, and he winters down there. He's down there right now with his wife. But in the summer, the house is kind of vacant, and the surf was really good in the summer. And I grew up surfing and diving in California. So I went down there with a bunch of buddies on a surf trip. And it was a cool group of guys. Like my friend Sohaib was a brain surgeon. My friend Glenn, who was actually one of the SEALs that died in the Benghazi incident working for the CIA, he was down there with us. My friend Sean, just a cast of characters, like all walks of life. Another guy, Kevin, we nicknamed the farm animal because he just like everywhere he went, it would just look like a stable of just junk and shit everywhere. And this guy, Marty, who was like the trip pothead. And Marty was a great guy, like just super, I think he's an X-ray tech in Oregon, just living the dream, right? He had a part-time gig at the ski hill, running the X-ray machine just so he could get a season pass. And was like a professional telemark skier for many years. But Marty, the only guy I know who smuggles pot into Mexico, these guys are going, him and a couple of the guys are, every night they're lighting up, and he had got these cookies, these pot cookies. And I was out after all day surfing. There's the outer reef and there's lobster, and the inner reef's kind of picked clean. But if you get out to like 30 to 40 feet of water where the local divers haven't kind of picked it clean, you can get down there and there's a lot of lobsters. So I went free diving and got a bunch of lobster. And like one of the last dives I did down, I came up and I noticed, and it was a beautiful visibility. I could hit the whales, were migrating. I could hear the whales singing like the song. But at the last dive, I come up and there's this school of these tiny little jellyfish. They call them aguamales, which is fine. Like they just sting a little bit. But I swam up and I'm out of breath, right? So I can't like divert out of this. I get up through these jellyfish and I have them like, for some reason, they just like got all around my mask and under my mask where my snorkel was. Like I had this like mustache of jellyfish and I was like wiping it off and I swam into the beach. And because your head is so vascular, I started feeling like this massive pain, like somebody had hit me over the head with a baseball bat. I've been bumped and bruised and had bad night parachute landings before. This was some of the worst pain I've experienced in my life. And I was just like devastated. I drove home, just like threw down my stuff and was like sitting in the corner with my head in my hands. And I think I popped a ibuprofen. It was like no relief. And I was there for like 30 minutes. And finally Marty came over and he handed me this pot cookie. And he's like, dude, just eat this. I'm like, you're crazy, man. He's like, just trust me. So I ate this freaking cookie. And 20 minutes later, it was like the pain vanished. And that was when I was like, okay, I get it now. Like I'm a believer. Like it was gone. Like somebody just turned a freaking switch off. And so anyway, that's my funny pot story.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for taking the time, Brandon. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll see you next time on the Pot.Live podcast. Have you visited MJ.com? MJ.com is the online destination where you can find everything you need to know about the emerging legal marijuana industry. Where else can you find the latest original content, news, and trends? Connect to a local doctor to obtain your medical marijuana card, receive exclusive brand savings, and have your favorite product delivered straight to your front door? MJ.com has it all. Go check them out.